I've spoken to so many people from Canada, and I don't think any of them feel that the government represents them. You seem to have an imposter who's taken it over, and it's a very dangerous imposter, judging by what's happening with the tar sands.
We work with these communities, and we're here at the climate change negotiations in part to elevate their voice and to stand up for them, those kind of community members from the tar sands area, to represent what's actually happening on the ground to Indigenous communities in particular. And what we've been seeing, what people have told us over the past number of years, is that a lot of these community members are starting to get diseases and sicknesses, cancers that they've never seen before, most frighteningly. People are also finding now that any animals that they hunt, fish, or trap are increasingly becoming sick as well. We're finding that people who traditionally depended off the land for their food, depended on traditional water sources in the area, are no longer able to consume from there, are no longer able to go into these areas to hunt or fish because of the extreme amount of concentrations of pollutants inside of some of these animals. What this really represents is the cultural destruction of some of our peoples. If it means that they're no longer able to practice their traditional lifestyles, if it means that they're no longer able to practice their human rights, their treaty rights, rights that were given to them, rights that were affirmed with the signing of the Constitution of Canada, for example, but also rights that are applicable under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And so partly why we're here in Durban is to express our extreme disappointment with the Canadian government, or extreme anger really, that Canada is here peddling the tar sands to an international level, calling it ethical oil, really misrepresenting the situation on the ground, and sort of using this as a sort of means to go and try and actually block progress here for the rest of countries, for the rest of the world. In Canada, in British Columbia, we have over 100 First Nations communities that have stepped up and said they're opposing the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. And so it's important to know that a lot of these projects won't go through because of the opposition of Indigenous communities. In Alberta itself, a lot of this opposition, a lot of this grassroots leadership is being led by First Nations communities. And they're leading with political movements, they're leading with social movements, and they're also leading with legal lawsuits that threaten to sort of derail a number of the tar sands proposed expansions. Just last week, the community of Athabasca Chippewa First Nations issued a lawsuit against Shell in particular, and we did an action here in support of local South Durban community justice activists who are also opposing Shell, to support those frontline and community activists who are standing up for their rights. And so we want, basically the world to know, Canadians to know, delegates here to know, why we're here, and that real Canadians do support just climate solutions and do not support our Canadian government's reckless tossing around of tar sands. And I think, the message here that we're trying to also deliver is that, time is over for false solutions and the fossil fuel regime, and the time is now for just climate solutions. Thank you.
François is a respected Dene elder and former chief. In the early days of the Dene Nation, the work of François and other chiefs helped advance the legal status of treaty rights for Treaty 8 and 11 beneficiaries in the Northwest Territories. As a member of a downstream community, he now advocates on behalf of First Nations impacted by tar sands developments. François?
Thank you. Thank you. Being to this part of the world, to this climate change conference, and hearing what the government of Canada has to say about climate change, I'm kind of insulted of Mr. Kent's remark that he's proud of the tar sands. Canada is regarded as a beautiful country. It is a beautiful country. I live by the second largest national park in the world, Wood Buffalo National Park. It houses the largest free-roaming herd of buffalo and also has the whooping crane that is right in the flight path of the tar sands. The Peace Athabasca Delta is one of the largest freshwater deltas in the world. We live in the second largest migratory bird route in Canada. I belong to the Dene Nation, that we have 33 First Nations north of the tar sands. This government that's in place right now, Mr. Stephen Harper's government, is doing everything with his government to destroy this natural beauty where the Dene have lived for thousands and thousands of years. Mr. Harper and his government are spending millions and millions of dollars in the United States lobbying in the support of building pipelines through the states, expansion through the BC. The Dene Nation, the people in the north, have numerous and numerous of conferences dealing with water. We have called on the government over the years to put a moratorium on the expansion of the tar sands. This killing field is killing people in Fort Chip. I just want to say that I am the chair of the Stanton Territorial Hospital. We are starting to find that cancer is becoming increasing. We have asked the doctors to do a survey, and stomach cancer is the highest in the north, opposed to what nationally it's the third. So something is happening. The doctors do not want to tell us that it's related to water, but it is related to water. This land that I come from, it is beautiful. This Wood Buffalo National Park is a land stretching over 17,000 square miles of land. This river that flows to the Arctic Ocean is over 1,000 miles. It touches everybody that lives along the river. The fish that survive in the river. We are 200 miles downstream from the tar sands, and we are starting to find deformed fish in our territory, in our rivers. Canada does not have a plan for the tar sands. Canada does not have a plan for water. There is no plan for what to do with water. Canada does not have a plan for energy. But yet this government can come here, coming from a democratic country, and not listening to the people. You do not have to be a wise man to see that the world is being destroyed around you. Yes, these people, these two, and more of them, to make the point, yeah, these people are not worth $100 billion. They are worth nothing if they continue to destroy the land that belongs to all people in Canada, and particularly the Indigenous people that live in that territory and to survive on the land. The tar sand produces up to a third of the green gas emissions. The woodland caribou are now put on the endangered species list, and they are blaming the wolves. And the expansion of drilling in their territory, the wolves, the caribou cannot handle that. And a minister just recently, Minister Oliver, recently made an announcement, made a press release that this land is uninhabited. Where is this guy coming from? I just want to say that I come from Treaty 8 and Treaty 11, the territories. We expand all of the rivers, the watersheds that flows to the Arctic Ocean. The treaties is what binds Indigenous people in Canada. We have answers of how to live together. We have answers of how to create an economy that is balanced. But this government is not listening. They have just recently, unilaterally, declared that we are no longer Indigenous people. They've changed the name to Aboriginal people. I don't like that. So I just want to say, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to say that this country that I live in is beautiful, and it's still beautiful, but if these two cowboys here continue to do what they're doing, that country is not going to be what it is. Very short time. So I just want to thank the organizers for asking me to come here. Masicho.